Project Plus, the spiritual successor to the famous Smash mod Project M, hasn't actually had a major balance update in over 4 years. The last thing that was even labeled as a balance update at all was in April of 2020. But finally, in 2024, on May 29th, the Project Plus Twitter account tweeted this string of emojis, which was quickly deciphered to meaning that a balance patch was finished and playtesting is soon. By not having a new balance patch in over 4 years, the meta has changed a lot, and I want to go back and take a look at some of those biggest developments throughout P Plus 2.0, with this new, potentially P Plus 3.0 on the horizon. Knuckles, without a doubt, has been getting away with murder for the last 4 years. He was only slightly nerfed once between the first patch of 2.0, and while not the best character in the game, he has been incredibly strong with some really broken attributes. If you don't know how Knuckles plays, he has a Sheik to Falcon level punish game with really good grab games and guaranteed throw follow-ups on basically the whole cast. The difference between him and those two characters, though, is that Knuckles has a really good recovery. He's near unedgeguardable with resources like Spin Dash, Glide, and climbing up the walls, and Spring. He has really good moves like a frame 2 jab and an up tilt that stretches so far back some people have called it a spot dodge with a hitbox. And that aforementioned Glide is an incredible neutral and punish tool as well, setting up a great angle for overshoot aerials and allowing tight follow-ups on throw combos. Since his release in 2020, Knuckles has been seen multiple times in the top 50, mainly by Kansas's Yono and Wisconsin's Samantha. Those two players have top-8'd multiple majors, proving that Knuckles is certainly a top-level threat. Knuckles is by far one of the most outspoken characters for Nerfs for an upcoming patch. Again, while he's not necessarily seen as the best character in the game, his incredibly strong attributes along with a great recovery and neutral game make him seen by having basically no flaws. Ice Climbers were already a dominant force in 3.6 leading into P+. Headed by Tech Boy, who's the back-to-back number 2 best player in the world, Ice Climbers have remained a consistent top-level bracket threat. But did you know that Ices were buffed even further by a glitch that they couldn't fix? Normally, just like Melee, Nana can only consistently forward or back throw when she's close to the ledge. When in center stage, PM has made it so that Nana will always up throw, making it so that Ices have to combo in the air as opposed to its handoffs that it likes to do. But thanks to a glitch discovered in the past couple of years called PNT, or Perfect Nana Throws, you can actually buffer Nana's throw even in center stage to any throw that you would like. At the moment, there are 3 different Ice Climbers players in the top 50, and Tech Boy has won Blacklisted 6, Project M Theater, Honeypot 4, PM Concert Symphony, Undertow 2023, and Honeypot 6, proving that he and Ice Climbers are one of the most dominant threats in Project Plus 2.0. It's unknown if PNT is able to be fixed and we'll see it patched out in the next version, or if it's something that we'll have to just get used to and is here to stay. More than ever, we saw Ice Climbers force secondaries out of top players, due to how divisive the character is and honestly having an incredibly wonky matchup spread. One of those incredibly common secondaries being Ike was not buffed or changed a ton in P Plus 2.0, but he was just seen more and more common and its top reps were performing way better. Ike is a character that just all in all has very good attributes and having really good throw combos and insane follow-up potential. His entire kit is revolving around his side B, Quick Draw, which is a neutral tool, a follow-up tool, a recovery tool, and it basically does everything. Ike was seen used throughout P Plus 2.0 by top reps such as Envy, Pikmon, Metroid, and as a secondary by Rangunchu, DVD, Stango, and more. He consistently placed in top 8s of majors, and Envy did win Honeypot 3, a pretty large regional in the Midwest, using Ike. Similarly to Ike, Zero Suit Samus was not known for her buffs necessarily, just her insane increase in popularity over the meta of the past few years. The most notable example of that is Malachi, former number 1 player in the world, made the full switch to Zero Suit Samus over the past few years and used her to win her first major at Blacklisted 8 this past fall. Even Tech Boy, the Ice Climbers main, picked her up as a more consistent secondary and used her effectively at Honeypot 6 to win the counterpick war against Rangunchu. Interestingly, many people are actually calling for nerfs to ZSS's hitbox, as her very thin frame lets her get out of so many attacks. Now really quick, I want to talk about characters that aren't commonly seen as top tiers, but characters that had crazy buffs in the patch that released 4 years ago. If Knuckles wasn't already seen as the poster head of the patch for the last 4 years, Squirtle would absolutely be second in line. He had a big change to his neutral bee, water gun, so that an uncharged neutral bee now shoots 2 small bursts. This was an insane buff to the character, as now Squirtle basically has access to short hop double laser. He was already a very well represented character at the top level with Dirt Boy and Cloudburst, and both of them continued to play incredibly well over the last few years. And you can even watch their gameplay compared to it in 3.6, where you see so much neutral bee use. Squirtle also actually had a size increase between P+ and 3.6, but it's not really a change that people have talked too much about. They're too busy getting gunned down by double water gun. There was one fundamental update about P+ that changed the whole scope of the game. For the Ultimate players, you'd actually be surprised that Tilt Stick was not in the game in the way that you expect it in Brawl and PM. There was a Tack Stick, which was notable for being able to perform neutral air using a C-Stick input, allowing full drift. But Tilt Stick was actually fully implemented into Project Plus, and it, combined with PM's mechanics, changed the game. No greater example of that is seen in Ganon was given a new up tilt in P+, a scooping stomp with an initial catching hitbox on frame 5. This was already a good buff to the character, as the old up tilt was not incredibly useful. However, Tilt Stick allowed Ganondorf to perform this out of crouch. CC up tilt on such a heavy character is incredibly strong, and very frustrating to fight against for a lot of players. Tilt Stick also allowed the use of easy pivot F tilts, which Ganon's used really effectively to just block out space in center. Ganon was seen in competition as a pretty strong counterpick character, with both Malachi and Chalupi using him as a secondary over the past few years, really shutting down some of the floatier matchups. Kirby received a couple pretty big changes in P+, one of those changes being a new grounded down B, an incredibly safe poking tool that could lead into grabs pretty consistently. And it's once Kirby gets that grab that he becomes incredibly dangerous, because in P+, his forward throw is ridiculous. Be it chain grabs on fast fallers and semi-fast fallers, follow-ups on floaties to ridiculously high percents, and kill confirms into his aerial hammer, F-throw is the reason why Kirby is strong in P+. Earlier on in the meta, it was Corey that broke into the top 20 and played incredibly well, and it was Av, the former Lucas main, who picked him up and did incredibly well in the last 2 years. Kirby has been seen pretty consistently throughout P+'s meta, with some pretty polarizing strong options. Now I want to take a second and highlight a couple characters that were nerfed from 3.6 to P+, and initially people thought that this would ruin their character. But it was over the course of the meta that it turns out the characters continued to perform quite well. Game & Watch was a dominant force in Project M 3.6, being seen in top 8s of almost every major, having some of the most top-level representatives, and overall just being a centralizing character for that game. People weren't necessarily surprised to see Game & Watch nerfs in Project Plus. Game & Watch saw nerfs across the board, but most often people cite losing double bacon out of a short hop as one of his biggest nerfs. However, what was more surprising was the amount of Game & Watch representatives that ended up dropping the character. Pikmon, being the most notable example, switched to Ike very early on, and actually continued to perform incredibly well with the character. Drug Freechu, although he would eventually dwindle in attendance and is basically retired at this point, basically saw exclusively his pit over the past couple years. And in the official tier list that came out in early 2022, right as in-person tournaments for P+ were returning, Mr. Game & Watch fell 18 places on the tier list, all the way to 24th. It is clear to see that the community thought at this point that Game & Watch was a shadow of his former top-tier self. But it didn't take long for Game & Watch to continue to perform really well in in-person tournaments. The Michigan Game & Watch Ellipsis would actually win both Joey's Birthday Bash and Super TPS in 2022. Mr. Watch and Learn would continue playing the character at a top level on the East Coast. And most recently, Rise actually won the Frosty Faustings P+ event over Twisty and Young Quaff. Although it took a while, it's safe to say that Game & Watch is still a strong character in PM. Much like Mr. Game & Watch, you don't have to look much farther than the 2022 tier list to see that the community was not feeling good about Snake in P+. He saw a lot of nerfs to his kill power between 3.6 and P+, and he dropped 22 spots on the tier list, all the way down to 34th. With his main top representatives like Flashing Fire, Flip, and Professor Pro rarely entering tournaments these days, it looked really lost for the 3.6 powerhouse to see much relevance anymore. But over time, interest started to pick up in the character again. Flashing Fire entered tournaments a little bit more often here and there, we saw new players such as Soul Officer start to perform well, and the general community consensus saw a lot more positive attributes about Snake. Now unfortunately, the theme of top representatives stopping entering tournaments did affect a couple characters pretty harshly. Mewtwo is still seen as a very strong character in P+, unfortunately it kind of has to be seen in theory as opposed to in practice. Both Frozen and Violet, incredibly strong reps of the character in 3.6, either went on to different competitive games or retired completely, and the only time you're seeing Mewtwo at a top level these days is Pikmon's tertiary character that he's now picked up for characters like Ice Climbers. Again, Mewtwo is not considered nerfed or incredibly weak these days, there just isn't anybody that's piloting the character in an incredibly successful way at the moment. Albeit to a lesser extent, Wolf is also now seen way less at the top level compared to 3.6. He did receive some small nerfs like losing his bayonet hitbox on his neutral B. Wolf is just seen way less at the top level. The name we all think of when we see Wolf in PM is Switch. He's now balancing his time competitively between multiple outlets, and we only see him just enough times so that he qualifies for rankings. He's still an incredibly strong player, and Wolf is still seen as one of the best characters in the game. He's just not seen in major top 8s like he used to. Peach is the last character I'm going to focus on for this video, and this poor character has unfortunately just fallen off the map completely at the top level. Obviously Malachi was her highest level representative in PM 3.6, and after he fully dropped the character, she just has not found her place in the meta at all. She has received one new move in her aerial down B, a hit grab that picks up opponents and throws them, but the entire community has kind of agreed that this move is basically unusable. Because it's a hit grab, it actually loses to shields, so there's basically no point where this move is an optimal choice over aerials or grabbing. Peach also actually lost the ability to pull bombs and beam swords in between 3.6 and P+. This was a surprisingly big nerf to her as well, as beam swords is an incredibly strong tool that can take stocks instantly, along with bombs as well, although more random. Looking at the cast, there's a couple other characters that I can talk about that have fallen off a little bit, usually due to lack of representatives. I could talk about Ivysaur or Falco or Toon Link, characters that uses in the meta are kind of dwindling, but we still see them every so often, because fundamentally, P+ still has achieved a meta where every character is still viable up to a certain point. Yes, majors are still won by top tiers, but they're also still won by the same small handful of people. Top 8s of majors, regionals, and filling out the top 50 rankings at the end of the year, we still see a wide variety of characters represented. Undoubtedly, the new update, hopefully coming later this month, will change the meta. Some characters will be nerfed, some characters will be buffed, but Project Plus has still continued to be a game where you can pick your favorites and win. 2022's tier list put Luigi as the third worst in the game, but there's a Luigi player who was top 20 in the world in 2022. Yoshi, the fifth worst character in the game according to the tier list, broke into the top 15 with Shiny Zubat this past year. Even Jigglypuff, seen as dead last on the tier list, got top 8 at a major in Undertow 2023. There's a whole world of opportunities for this new patch, and hopefully you'll be there with me trying them all out and picking your favorites. Special shout out to our patrons for supporting us. Check out the link in the description if you want to see videos early, get special updates, and have a voice on what you see on this channel. Thanks.